Right.
Oh, you want me to finish that
Yeah,
sentence?
yeah.
I didn't
So
know that was the actual
so
question.
we'll start with the test. We'll start with a little test here. What is your name?
My name is Emilio Mignucci.
And what is your job description here at the Bruno Brothers?
Oh boy, my job description here. Well, what I do here at the Bruno Brothers, I'm third generation. I was fortunate enough to be born into the family, and I guess ultimately my job is to eat really good and drink even better. But I go out and I search product for the family business and make sure that the product is of the highest quality that we can get from all over the world. Well, it's funny. What is a soupy? Okay, so I didn't know what a soupy was until back in the early 90s when people from the coal region would come down here, or even the Poconos area would come down and say, "Oh, you got soupies," and I was like, "Soupies? What the heck's a soupy?" And you know, in our minds here, it's soprasad, you know, and people make fun and they joke soprasad, and that, you know, that there's no vowels at the end, and you know, is that like SUPERSAD? SUD, soprasad, it ends in a D. But you know, it has a lot of S's and a lot of T's. Soprasad, and ends in an A, I'll tell you that. So, so when I found out, you know, they were calling it Soupies up there, and that's what it was. Then I knew, okay, you know, yes, we sell Soupies, and the Soupies that my grandparents used to make, or the soprasadas that they used to make, and that we sold here, were, you know, a hot and a mild, and they did a round and a flat style. We no longer do the flat style, which is very Calabrese, to press the flat. But they also made an Abruzzi sausage, which is very similar. So it was a thinner, longer cured sausage that was a little more coarse grind than a soprasada or a soupy, as you might want to say. You can find this type of product all over Europe. Generally, it's a Southern Italian product, you know, in and around Calabria, Abruzzo, even down in Sicily, they'll make it. When you go up in the northern regions of Italy, most of the time they're using whole muscle meats and curing those. We're down south because it's less industrial. They're more farmers. They use up every part of the pig, and they'll grind it into a salami or a soupy and cure them and age them and cure them. And so they never lost anything or never gave away or had much scraps to throw away. That was just a way to use up the whole hog.
Right.
Okay, so as farmers, you had to prepare for the long winters, right? And you know, it's the same process with cheese. They'd make their cheese, they'd make them in, you know, larger wheels so that they can sustain all winter long. So when they made the soprasads and they cured them, and they would have this meat product that they didn't waste, and it would be dry like a salami and hard, and they could just cut it and it would give them energy, and they'd make smaller ones that they would call cacciatorinis or hunter style sausage, because when they would go hunting in the spring, they'd have these little sausages, they'd put them in their pockets or in their bags, and they'd use that as a snack, and that would be their, you know, energy bar, or that would be their protein for the day while they were out hunting all day. They'd have a couple of these little pieces and some bread that they would eat. So, and a block of cheese, because those are sustainable items that they could be gone all day long while they're hunting and, you know, nourish themselves. A soupy is a salami, but a salami isn't a soupy, right? Okay, so Soupies or soprasadas fall into the salami family. Ultimately, that family of cured meats, whether it's whole muscle meats like prosciutto or speck, or some type of finocchione salami, or some soprasada or soupy salami, fall into a category called salumi, S-A-L-U-M-I. Salumi is plural for all of that, and that's where the word salami is derived from. Salamis generally today are thought of as a larger deli meat that's sliced, but it's a finer grind, usually with a little bit of black pepper in there, sometimes garlic, sometimes fennel. It depends on who is making it. And then the coarser grinds are usually made in the smaller, shorter chubs, as we call them today. But that becomes the soupy or the soprasada. if you think of cured meat, and people ask me all the time, well, how do I cook it? You don't cook soppressata or salami. It's essentially cooked. So think about sushi, right? Use the use of, or ceviche, the use of wine vinegars or rice wine, or, an acid that helps to cook and break down. Cooking is really the process of breaking down the protein to a more tender form and then convert it to an edible product. Well, that's essentially what the wine does with the enzymes within the soppressata. It's actually in the curing process breaking down the protein so that it can be palatable and edible for our digestion. So it's the same idea and the same process. It's a good question that people ask about why some are pressed and some are left round. What's the reason? The only thing that I can think of in my years of traveling, because nobody really has a great answer. I know that it's very much a Calabrese style to be pressing them. Alla matone is how they say it in Italian. Matone is pressed between bricks, kind of like when they do chicken. They do a cooked chicken alla matone, and they'll just cut the backbone out and then put it between bricks and then roast it in the oven like that. It's a process that comes from that region, that area, and pressing it does another thing. When you press it, you're actually expelling a little bit more moisture out of the product. So you're forcing some more moisture out so that it dries quicker. That's just like out of my brain, out of my thoughts. It's possible that that's the texture and the style that they much prefer, and that's why they do it that way. When they're left totally round and not pressed, it's sometimes a chewier texture in those soppressatas. So it's really to each his own. And, that's really the best answer I can give you without knowing exactly. But I've asked this question over and over, and I haven't gotten really great answers. Oh my God, what pairs well with a soppressata? I think, for me, soppressata is, I'm born and raised on them. I love them. I eat them, I could eat them every day, but at least a couple of times a week. For me, and the best way to eat soppressata, I think, is just to buy the piece because it lasts forever. It never goes bad. And cut what you want as you're eating or when you're getting ready to eat, so that it's a little bit thick, not too thin. Sometimes people come in the stores and they want it sliced thin. You lose the texture. For me, it's all about the texture. So something like that, it's very rustic, and I want rustic style cheeses to go with that. Usually it's going to be, and I love just to eat Parmigiano Reggiano. It's the king of cheese. It's one of the oldest cheeses in the world, and to stand up to that texture when I'm biting on thicker cuts of Soupies. I like to have a piece of something that's going to be sharp but not too sharp. It doesn't have to be like an overly aged provolone. I love sharp provolone, but and it goes very well with Soupies, and like when I'm watching the game, that's perfect. If the Eagles, hot soppressata and a nice piece of provolone, I'm living life. And if not provolone, Parmigiano Reggiano or a great pecorino, because they're very rustic, old world styles of foods, and that's what I like to pair with it. And believe it or not, a good cold beer, an IPA, something like that goes well with it. Or if you're going to have wine, you're going to have something more with a little bit more body in a red, Chianti, Barolo, like those styles of reds, help to raise the level of authenticity in my mind, and then rusticity. And the bread has to be crusty bread, whether it's sarcones or farigallis, like it needs to be a crusty bread with a good crusty, outside that, you break off and eat, and you eat one and the other. And often enough, my wife will say, why don't you just make a sandwich with it? And like, I like it in pieces, yeah, sandwich is great. And I know I'm making a mess, but it tastes better to me in chunks and pieces. It's all about texture for me.
Well, I'm gonna start watching the Eagles games with you. We have a kegerator at the home.
Oh, it's perfect. And it's the perfect thing for antipasto, man. I mean, you do a nice antipasto with roasted peppers and olives, and there's no better, simple ingredients. It's The guys that are vacuum sealing the Soupies, they're doing that so that they don't dry too much, and so that here's what happens today. It's a lot more expensive to make a soprasad or a soupy, and you don't want all that hard work, that time and that effort, and the meats that you're buying, because everybody's buying, they're buying shoulder and they're grinding it fresh and they're adding the fat to it to make sure that it stays nice and moist and doesn't dry out too much and to give it more flavor. When you're spending all that time, effort, and money to create something, you don't want it just to get old and dry and not be around. So when you cryovac it, when you shrink wrap that, you're suspending its aging process, which is cool. So that you can control how much is aging at how quick a rate. So there's nothing wrong with that. Age it to a point, and then cryovac it, and then when you're ready to eat them, cut a few, let them stay open in your fridge or in your basement or anywhere, and they'll dry a little bit more for you. Sometimes you judge it, you feel them. Sometimes it might take a week, sometimes it might take an extra month or two, depending on how much they've aged to begin with. But there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a very smart idea. If not that, then you need to be putting them in the oil. The problem with storing your Soupies in the oil all the time is that if it gets too warm, where you have them stored and that oil goes rancid, you're going to lose a lot of really hard work, and really great, meat that you've spent time and energy and money on. And, so it becomes much more difficult to store them in olive oil for that long. I don't think enough people know about soprasad or understand what soprasad is or really get soprasad. I love to get it in people's mouths and give them a taste. And those people that have no idea, and when you see their eyes light up and they're like, oh, and they get it by the taste, and then they start to get hooked on it. I mean, like that. For me, in our business and what we do, I love to make people happy, by letting them try great foods. And I think, soprasads are one of a really, really important traditional item, product, food item that has a story to tell in our heritage, in our Italian heritage. I mean, it's important to understand where it comes from and why. I think as young people come along and don't understand, I made it my mission to teach my kids about all the tradition of our culture. And I'm not just snobbish on the Italian culture. I love culture. Food tells you a whole lot about the different cultures around the world, and I love learning about it. And to understand the Italian culture is to understand the food and the art. It all goes hand in hand. It's very important for those people that eat just to eat and don't eat to enjoy it. I feel sadly for them because soprasad, like prosciutto, is a real treat. It's a real special item, and you can learn a lot from just asking a couple of questions about it. So the people in Italy and where Italy comes from. It's always amazing to me when I go to Italy, and I'll be there in a couple of months again. I go almost every year. When I walk around the streets, that this is a country that's been around for tens of thousands of years, and these buildings are still up, for that long. And then I come home and I see dilapidated buildings I can't stand. And I'm like, man, and we are such a young country. And when I'm there, I learn so much about Italy and the regions wherever I'm at because everybody knows the history. Even the young kids learn it. Here, we don't know anything about our country. And, I'm a little bit embarrassed sometimes about what I don't know. And, it really comes down to the food and the culture. It's important. So that's what the Bruno Brothers tries to do. You know, we try to make sure that whether it's Italian, Spanish, German, Austrian, Swiss, you name it, of all the foods that we sell, and we're predominantly European, um, you know, um, food products throughout our businesses. We try to make sure that we're making people understand the how, the where, the why, the what, the who. Majority of our products come from actual people rather than, mass produced, big companies, in Europe or here. We have relationships with 90% of the people who produce the products that we carry. And we can tell you stories and put names to the people, and talk about them all day long if you want to hear about it. And that's what we do. That's what we believe in. We believe in the people and the culture, and the way that they produce foods. And talk about sustainability. I mean, it's all over here now in the United States. People are talking about it, but it's a very European thing. And we're out there to support not just our local Philadelphia and Pennsylvania farmers and growers, but the European ones as well. And you'll get those stories at the Bruno Brothers if you want to hear them.
That's why